podcast for those who suffer, which is everyone.
It's a space where we can speak honestly about what it feels like to be in desolate places without losing hope.
Welcome to In the Thicket. Long live Christ the King. We talked this week all about the kingship of Christ. So we talk about what it looks like to have Christ be king in our lives. We talk about his kingship and how it contrasts to our understanding of earthly kingship. And we talk about lots of other things that prepare us to enter into our Advent series, which is all about the pain of waiting in various aspects, whether it's waiting for love, waiting for healing, waiting for clarity, or waiting for Christ to come again. So we hope you enjoy this episode, and we hope that you'll journey with us on the way to Christmas.
Hey guys!
Hey! Oh, I made a great face there.
Oh, did you?
One of the ones where you do like intentional double chins.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I do that if I get on FaceTime. I forget why. And I do something funny and I'm like, sorry, do this face.
Have you done it though, where you you do a down angle, right? Like your camera, because then it's not just two chins, it's like five. if you film yourself from directly below the chin, pushing your face back in, it's see. 10 chins. It's I saw the
funniest
there you go.
Instagram reel the other day. It was a girl doing that. So she's in bed and she's filming from here. So she got the phone right up here and her face looks all clumpy and whatever. And
right.
And she gets a text message and she's she says, babe, send me some pics. And then she holds the phone out and she's gorgeous. She's got makeup on, her hair is beautiful, and she's like, mwah, and she sends the pics or whatever, and then she brings the phone back down. She's like,
wow. That's hilarious.
That's great.
It was highly entertaining.
Yeah.
That's great.
I love stuff like oh my gosh, right. I mean, everyone knows this, but Instagram and TikTok and all that stuff, their rabbit holes are many and they run deep. They go.
Yeah.
They go deep and far.
I don't have TikTok. Well, I do have TikTok now, but I don't use TikTok. I had my students do an assignment where they had to teach some music therapy concepts over social media, about the clinical process, as if they had their own business and were trying to market or raise awareness or whatever it is. Cool. And so a couple of my students did Instagram, a couple of them did TikTok, one did TikTok, and some did something called CARD, CARD. So all these different, which I'd never heard of, but
what is CARD?
CARD is apparently it's a Reddit thing, and it's a click through info thing. So you have what is X, and then the description and be follow-up question, what is this? And you click the follow-up question, and then it comes up with a new page, and it has so you can kind of, it's a choose your own adventure. It was they're great. So I had to go sign up for a TikTok account. I had to revive my Instagram account and all of this stuff. And then, TikTok, when I was trying to figure out how the heck it works and everything, because I'm just old and don't understand things, but there was so many videos and I was like, I think I understand. These are funny. I'm very amused by this cat or whatever,
You're so cute. You're that's a grandma thing.
I know.
Get it. But actually, maybe grandmas wouldn't even get it. I think grandmas would get it, actually. You know what? That's not giving grandmas enough.
Listen, some grandmas are on TikTok.
I know. That's true.
That's true. My grandma's 92 and she is she kills it on Facebook. When she's commenting on people's posts, it's always the best comment, and not best, oh, it's cute grandma, but she's sharp.
Slays it.
Oh yeah. It's amazing.
Oh my gosh, I hope I'm a grandma like that, or just an old person like that, whether or not I'm a grandma. I think some old people just rock it so well.
Right. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, today we are talking about the Feast of Christ the King.
Woo! Yay.
And
dun, dun, dun.
Right. And so it's a very joyous occasion. And I was thinking about Hamilton, because that's just we love musicals at I just love musicals. And so I was listening to the soundtrack recently, and King George's songs are some of my favorite. I'll Be Back.
They're so funny.
It's just so good. It's so good, right? They're so funny. So then I was thinking King George, Christ the King, not the same kinds of kings. Very, very different kings. But I still love King George's songs, and they're awesome. So I want to know, Like, yeah, what are you guys listening to right now, musical wise? Because that's where I'm at. I'm listening to some
Rachel,
Hamilton.
I do not listen to musicals as music. I think that's ridiculous. I don't think anyone should. I don't understand why people do that. Either watch the thing or don't, or why would you listen to the songs out of context? It just doesn't make sense to me. I'm sorry. Maybe we'll get some hate mail now, but I just don't understand it. I'm sorry. I
feel like we've had this headbutt before in another in the thicket episode, and I was like, and you were like,
it rings
I don't
the bell.
like musicals, and
I stand by my position. I stand by it.
I respect it. It's respectable.
I did like Hamilton. I watched Hamilton, and I thought it was amazing. Yeah,
Nicole, this is gonna blow your mind even more. I have never watched it. I have only listened to the soundtrack.
Rachel. Yeah. You are the worst. Yeah. You are the worst. I don't think you should. You need to go and watch it. Promise me you'll watch it. Like this weekend.
I will watch it. I know that it's good because everyone says it's good, but I think I was just one of those like contrarian people. I was like, everyone loves it. I'm like, meh, I don't want to do the thing.
I'm embarrassed to be on this podcast with you, Rachel. This is terrible.
And this is even worse. I even have access to Disney Plus. So it's not even like I can't watch it. Like I can actually watch it.
I'm sorry.
That's so great.
Yeah.
Anyway, Erin, do you have anything to say?
Well, that's funny. Okay, so I do have something to share on this note. I just saw that there is a new movie adaptation of the musical Wicked coming out.
Oh,
and
what?
Wicked, yeah. And Wicked is one of my favorite movies. And it's
I mean musicals.
Sorry, yes, musicals. And it's going to be Ariana Grande, who is one of who probably is like Glinda maybe or something like. Yeah. So somebody, this is another thing on, okay, I swear I don't spend all day on Instagram, but this was another Instagram thing that I saw that was like somebody imitating how she's going to be in the musical movie. And it's going to be like, popular, yeah. And like whatever she does, I don't even know the noises that she makes, but throwing Ariana Grande. But I do enjoy that one. I do remember listening or going to, okay, so similar to you, Rachel, I grew up, I listened to Les Mis. I loved that musical. I knew every line, every word to every line of every song.
Nicole's
I could sing the whole thing backwards and forwards.
I'm just knitting and listening to you guys speak nonsense.
I did read the book. I did read the book, you know.
Okay, fair.
So that was like, okay, but when I actually did get to see it in person, I bawled the whole time. Like the actual, not the movie of it, but like in person, in the theater.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh. It was just like, like I brought a couple of guy friends with me and I'm sitting between my guy friends just like bawling and they were just like, what?
It's good. You know, they were probably crying a little bit too. And then you just like diverted the attention from them.
I think I did also give them like a heads up, like just an FYI, I may
plan to be emotional.
Be escorted out of the theater at some point.
You know what? I have like I'm thinking Les Miserables, both that musical and like Hamilton, where I've watched for Les Miserables, I watched the movie first. But I had never read the book. I knew absolutely nothing about the story. I was just like went in blind. And I was just kind of like, ooh, this is beautiful. This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, you know? And then everyone who's talking about like, oh yeah, the movie this, because it wasn't this, you know, this thing. And I was just like, how can you say that? You know, because I just thought, but it's like the story is so beautiful. But it's the same thing with Hamilton, where everyone was like, oh, Hamilton. And I was like, oh, okay.
And
eventually watched it.
So good.
And Come From Away. These are so these are good ones. But I reiterate, like watch the thing. Watch the thing. Don't just listen to the music.
Nicole, I have also not seen Hamilton. I've also not seen it.
Aaron.
Oh man. This is bad. We're getting
can we just talk about whatever our top? Can we talk about Christ the King now?
Yeah.
Let me just move on.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. No, but actually
so good.
I apologize to everybody out there who feels the same way Nicole does. And I'm sure there are many of you there. Right. There's a Hamilton army coming after us.
Okay. We'll have remedied the situation by that point in time.
That's probably true.
I expect you to.
Yeah. All right. I'm kidding. Yeah, no, we will. But yes, King George, Christ the King, not the same people, but thankfully not the same people. Yeah, we're actually really
How do you
excited
know, thankfully, not the same people? You
Whoa.
didn't even watch the thing. I'm sorry. We're
Listen.
moving on. All right.
Wow, that was what's the word for that? That was salty.
Harsh?
Nicole.
Oh,
Salty.
salty.
That was salty.
Is that like a thing? Is that what the kids are saying now? Ooh, I didn't know.
No, that's like what the kids were saying like a year ago. I have no idea what the kids were
A
saying.
year ago. Oh, I have no idea then. Okay.
For all of the students that were at the chaplaincy, my beloved Canadian Martyrs Church and Chaplaincy at MAC, I had lots of people educate me on what the kids are saying.
Oh, that's good.
But then I no longer know. So
it moves fast.
It moves really fast.
Because TikTok.
Right. So yeah, we wanted to talk about this feast day, but not just about the feast day, because we want to introduce our Advent series, which is going to be on waiting, and waiting for all kinds of things, waiting for love, waiting for healing, lots of different things like that. But it's obviously no accident that the church places this feast day right before, like at the end of the year, right before a new year begins, right before we enter into this season of Advent, the season of waiting. And we were just reflecting on how those two things connect. Like, what does it mean to really encounter Christ the King in our lives? And how does that change us when we're approaching Advent, and what does that mean for us? So I want to ask you guys, like, what does it mean? What does the kingship of Jesus mean for you? Maybe Nicole, what do you think?
Yeah. We were talking a little bit about this before we recorded, and what came to mind is that my own even unfamiliarity of what it means to have a king. I'm from Canada. We have a prime minister. I guess we technically have a queen,
Sure.
But having very little experience, like what does that really mean? What does that look like? And even just general, I think I have a general distrust of or cynicism perhaps about all politics in general and these kinds of things. So kings and presidents and prime ministers, in my mind, I'm like, well, it's all corrupt and whatever, obviously there's good people, but I'm just, yeah. And so then when we have Christ the King, it's like, I'm like, okay, what does that mean? I mean, the images of Jesus with a crown on his head and sort of conquering evil and conquering sin, I can talk about all of that. Yeah. But in terms of a personal kind of a heart, like, what does it mean for me in my heart? It's like something that I have a curiosity about, maybe. I'm like, what does that mean? I can think of Jesus as a friend, Jesus as a protector, Jesus as one who loves me, as a shepherd, even, I don't have a lot of experience with shepherds either, but can kind of imagine a little bit more. There's a lot of parables. But king it seems a little more sort of scary maybe, or a little more foreign. And yet there's something that draws me to that too, of okay, a king, that means he's in charge. And I think I can remember times where my mom would be praying for some situation, and she'd be like, she'd say a little prayer before bed. Jesus be the Lord of our dreams and the King of our hearts. Mary be the mother of our dreams and the Queen of our hearts. And I always remember that little bedtime prayer of okay, Jesus is the King of my heart. That means that I'm protected somehow. I've got this protection, So it's little things like that where I think about Christ the King, but definitely a lot of room to grow into that and think about what does that mean? So I'm really curious about what you guys have to say too. Yeah. Erin, what about you?
I saw it on Instagram. Honestly, I swear I don't watch Instagram all day. It sounds like it's the only thing I do.
I mean, no one accused you of that, Erin. So
I know.
No, just joking. It's all good. It's all good.
Oh my, but I did see something on Instagram about the the feast of Christ the King, because only kind of recently that it's been moved to the last Sunday before Advent, right? As kind of the crown of the year, like the new year, the new liturgical year, all of those kind of things, because previously it was the Sunday before All Saints. And so even thinking about what that means, like on the Feast of All Saints and All Souls, like we're celebrating all of the saints of the church. We're celebrating like the Christ. We're celebrating the church triumphant, which is, you know,
Yeah.
in
Mhm.
heaven, the saints in heaven now. We're
Mhm.
celebrating the church suffering, which is the Feast of All Souls, like those who are in
Mhm.
purgatory, and then Christ the King is really celebrating the church militant in a lot of ways, because it's like a
Right.
declaration of Christ's lordship, even
Right.
over, like, of his final lordship over everything, you know.
Yeah.
Right. Can we real quick just define
Yeah.
church militant? Because I feel like that has a
Yes.
lot
Oh,
of
true. Yeah.
other meanings now, you know?
Yes.
Um,
So the church militant in this sense would not be the church violent. That is not what it means. But really it's the church that is still in this condition of ours, of flesh and blood, under the effects of sin. So that would be the
Mhm.
church militant, because we are we're in a sense fighting the effects of sin in our own nature, and there's like a fight for holiness. There's the church, like the work of building the church on earth, the work of, yeah. Is there anything you want to add to that, Rachel, other theology student? Nicole, other theology student?
I was just gonna say that, I mean, mainly the church on earth, like we are like
Yeah.
the church living present now is the church militant, but you did a good job, Erin, of defining what militant means in that
means.
Mhm.
context. Yeah.
Yeah. And just like, you know, I'm not a theologian here, but just my understanding of, if you're militant, it means you're fighting something. So who is our enemy? We need to know who our enemy is, and that who our enemy is not. And our enemy is not, you know, people of other faiths. It is not things that are out there in the culture. It is not any people, but it is sin. Our enemy is
Yeah.
sin, and that's our fight.
Satan and
Sin
the
and Satan,
reign of death.
and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the primary battle for that is in our own hearts and our own lives, and
Mhm.
in the
Yeah.
daily death to self, and allowing the Lord to purify us of our own sin.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Which is interesting too, even when I think about the Feast of Christ the King, because it makes me think about like John, and when like I listened to a talk that somebody said where they talked about John the Baptist, sort of just giggling because you may have listened to
You know
our
what?
episode from when loved ones suffer, and we talked a
And
little
we
bit
just
about the Apostle
recorded
John.
these on the same day, and
Yeah.
so anyway, we'll just keep it there. All right, keep
Right.
doing it. Aaron, John the
Anyways,
Baptist.
so John the Baptist. I heard somebody who was talking about him is basically saying like that when he said like there goes the Lamb of God, like behold the Lamb of God, that it
Mhm.
was that people would have been looking for a literal lamb, you know. So
Hmm.
there's like that recognition, or
Hmm.
even the recognition um of how the Jewish people would have seen the Messiah, right? Like who they were looking for. They were
Yeah.
looking for essentially a destroyer, like somebody who's going to
Right.
come and destroy the Romans, who's going to come and destroy all of these secular cultures, who is going to save the Jewish people, who is going to re-enthrone them, who is going to, you know, set things right, and in a very in like a very stark fashion,
Militant
militant
way.
way. Yeah, really, you know.
Yeah.
And even when you're talking about uh like Caesar is king, like that would be, there would be the proclamation, the evangelion. Like I keep thinking about these talks that people have given, so that's all Bishop Barron, you know, where he talks about evangelion is what would happen when a ruler would send out kind of sentries after a battle, to be like they would send out messengers to proclaim the victory of the king, and it's like this evangelion, you know. So like, and then they would say like Kaiser Christos, you know, like Kaiser Christos, and that's like Caesar is king, and that's like the declaration of victory, you know. And and that's like the victory of Christ is so much like that and so little like that at the same time. Like that's what always strikes me about his kingship, of like the lamb, you know, like it's his, like the Lamb of God, that people were looking for an actual lamb, but it was him who would be like killed and rise and all of those kind of things. And like his victory, where he's sending out, you know, evangelion, like the messengers to proclaim his victory in the world, which looks so much different than what the Jews would have been expecting it to look like. And then I think even in my own life, I'm like that, like I have, like it was a great line from Father Jacques Philippe, I think, where he talks about that we don't know what our own holiness consists of. And I'm like, you know, like that, even like I have no idea what Christ's kingship actually looks like in my own life, in its fulfillment in a lot of ways, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought of that actually. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
No,
I think. Oh, sorry.
keep doing that. You go, Rachel.
Okay. Well, I just think that like there are two. I guess there's two things I think of when I think of Christ's kingship. I think of that the idea of him being, like you said, Nicole, like sovereign in my life, and there for me that's actually very, very comforting, and it's actually not hard for me to do. I think that has to do in a way with which maybe other people can relate to, like some of my experiences at adoration and like with the Eucharist, because I think that in a sense there's sometimes God allows us to encounter him in the Eucharist in such a way that like you just become aware of how small you are, I think, in some ways. Or even for me, that was always an encounter with God. Like my smallness is always actually a very comforting encounter with God. So even I remember as a kid, I would like look up at the stars and like just think of God as like this really big person who's out there, who held all of this, who like created all of this. And I always would feel really small, and I felt really good about that for some reason. It just made me feel really, I don't know, really like safe. Yeah,
safe and held or something.
Yeah, exactly. And so when I think of God's kingship and I think of Jesus's kingship, I feel that kind of safety. And it made me think of actually one of a very influential person in my life is Saint Teresa of Avila, just from her story, not even like from her writings. Like I haven't even read really a ton of her writings, but I've read her autobiography a couple of times, and I just really connect with her personality. I think she has like such a big and beautiful and real personality, and
she's sassy.
She's so sassy, you know. But one of the things, and she reminds me like my grandmother was like this, like a larger than life person, you know, like they just walk into a room and they just fill it up. Like that's the kind of personality I feel like she might have had. And then when she speaks to the Lord, like she comes from this era where it's like it's Baroque and everything is kind of ornate and like intense. But when she prays, she often says to God, she calls him your majesty, or she says his majesty, you know? And there's something so right about that. And so I just, when I think of Jesus's kingship, and actually I wrote, now maybe I'm going to ramble a little too much, but I wrote a paper on this because on St. Teresa of Avila's thinking about God in this way, because at that time, the time she lived, the kings of that time, they were really, their power was made known by their opulence, like how much stuff they had and the gold and like their robes, and the kingship of Christ is made known like in a stable, you know, and that it's because, and St. Teresa picks up on this and it's so beautiful, it's because his authority is inherent. There's no need, like there's literally no need for any of that outer stuff, because his authority is so real that you bow before it in like when he is literally in the form of a child in a manger, because it just hits you like this is God, this is who the creator of everything, and he doesn't need opulence because he just is that, you know. And I think that is something that's just so powerful for me and comforting to me. But then the other thing that I always think about is how much have I let that shape my life? Like I know that is true, and I've had a really deep encounter with that. But then when I wake up in the morning, is Christ really king? You know, like you said, Nicole, like was he Lord of my dreams, and is he king of my heart? Like when I wake up, who is king? Like what is the king of my life in that moment? You know? And I guess to tie it a little bit into our Advent series too, is that a rule that I'm excited for? Like, am I excited for the birth of the king? You know, like, is it something that I am drawn to? Am I open to that really? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so easy for our misconceptions of God to, because that was even one of the ideas that we had about maybe for an Advent series of doing like a series on like what are some of the misconceptions that we can have in our image of God, because it's exactly that. Like if we see God as a tyrant, or if we see him as
Yeah.
uninvolved, or if we see him as uncaring or vindictive or like detached or like anything like that he's not, then we never be able to be under his rule, really.
Right.
Or his rule will be something that we experience as oppression and not
Right.
freedom, so
Yeah.
that, like, I love thinking about that. Even just when you were saying that, I was like, oh my gosh, I think I need to really think about that, about like the
Hmm.
fruits of things, because in the areas that I'm free are probably areas where Christ truly has like the victory in those areas. Like he truly is king of those areas. But then if I look at areas where I'm not free, where I don't experience the fruits of like freedom and peace and all of those kind of things, then those
Hmm.
are probably areas that need to come more authentically under Christ's kingship in some
Yeah.
way.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting, like thinking about that. I'm just, okay, what does it mean for my heart, saying the king of my heart? There's a praise and worship song, right? That you're the da,
King
da,
of
da,
my
da,
heart,
heart
be
beat.
the wind inside my
Right.
sails. Yeah,
It's beautiful. And like, what does that mean practically? I'm like, okay,
yeah.
kings, a good king protects his people.
Hmm.
So there's can be a trust. So do I trust the Lord? A good king provides. Do I trust that the Lord is going to provide for my needs? Do I rely on the Lord for things? Do I ask the Lord for things? Um, I don't know. A good king will fight the battle for me. Am I trying to solve all the things in my life and not asking him to do it? Where is my heart not trusting? A good king
Hmm.
maybe inspires hope about the future because he's running things well. Do I feel like, how do I trust that Jesus the King has my future in his hands? And I struggle with a lot of those things, I think. Also a good king is usually we obey the king. If I don't know, in those societies there's an obedience and the respect and the honor due to the king. There's a hierarchy, there's an order to things, and then hopefully, a good king, it's because you trust the king, because the king is your good. So do I, is there a sense of where I trust and hope and rely on this king to the point of just obedience and surrender? And yeah, and I struggle with a lot of those things, especially in areas of my life where that are a struggle, and that are where I'm uncertain about what is going to happen, and I feel like I need to take things into my own hands sometimes, or I just feel hopeless, or whatever it is. But to remember that I have Jesus is king and is powerful, that I can trust, and then that obedience comes in just like the everyday, what am I called to do today? And then do those things and trust that it'll all kind of is moving towards something. But I think I struggle with all of those things, Um,
Yeah.
and I don't know, like I think sometimes God is all loving and all powerful. And I think we've talked a lot about, maybe in different ways of how or at least I hear a lot of people talking about how we can not sometimes trust the love of God, it's hard for us to trust that God loves us. But I think for me, sometimes it's also trusting that God is this powerful king, that Jesus is this king who actually has all of this power. Because sometimes I'm like, well, I don't understand why you're not doing this thing. If you had this power, why wouldn't you, And then I don't trust that he really can or really will or really, So I don't know. It's, I find myself personally challenged by this kind of invitation to think about Christ as the king of my heart.
Yeah.
I could be getting this wrong, but I don't think I am. The institution, I think, of this feast day is also not just the moving of it to this time, but the original institution of it as we have it now was because it was sort of connected to the situation in Mexico, where the government was essentially shutting down. It was like about 100 years ago, maybe. The government was shutting down religious organizations, and especially the church actually was being heavily persecuted in Mexico at that time. And it was the Cristero Wars basically, and essentially you had all these martyrs come out of that time. And maybe I can't remember their names right now. I actually have I've read some of their stories quite closely, but literally I'm drawing a blank right now. But there's one specific one who was a teenager who I think he was recently canonized. He was beatified for a long time. I think he was recently canonized. He was 14. And their cry, so a lot of them, when they were murdered, their cry would be like, long live, in Spanish, long live Christ the King, right before they were murdered. And I think there's something about, so this feast day was somewhat instituted in a soft way for the church to be supporting them, because it wasn't an accident that it was instituted around that time, and it's Christ the King, and that was what they would cry. That was their battle cry in a way. Yeah. And part of me is like, there is a call in that. There's kind of it is radical. The kingship of Christ is radical to the point where people have died for that kingship, right, all throughout our church's history. And I think there's a part of that in me too, where it's like, what am I holding on to that is stopping me from entering into this kingdom that should be that where my king is really my all, like it. And I think, and it plays into some of the things that you're saying, Nicole, because I think part of it is like, well, my king can only be my all if I really, really, really know that he loves me. If I really, really, really know that his will for my life is really what is my best life. Like if I really understand who he is. And I think that's why waiting, Christmas is only good news if Jesus is a good king, And there's something about the salvation that he's offering us that is radical, because it's not the salvation the Jewish people were expecting, for some of them at least. And I think sometimes it's not the salvation that we're expecting, but it's better, right. And I think I feel like there is that process that God is constantly every year in the cycle of the church's liturgical calendar, calling us into a deeper encounter with something better than we could even have planned for ourselves, something deeper, something more real and more foundational to our good than we would even have anticipated. And you said that, Aaron, when you said I don't really know what holiness looks like in my life. And and that makes me excited in a way, because in that sense, I have to follow my king. And he has to lead me into that. I don't know the way there. And I think a lot of times I try, I'm like, Lord, get out of the driver's seat. I'm getting in because I know where
you are taking weird roads.
Yeah.
I don't like these roads.
No, exactly.
Yeah. Do you mind if I just drive for a bit? Yeah.
Right. It's going to make back on track. Dirty, these dirt roads, terrible, bumpy.
Yeah.
And it's I don't know. Okay. So we were talking in a different episode that we recorded today about, or maybe we were just talking before. I don't know. Anyways, TV shows that we watch, and I've been watching the Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. series, and so they've got their leader of there's this team of secret agents who battle aliens and such, is named Phil Coulson, right? And are we allowed to talk about movies on this podcast? It's copyright stuff, whatever.
Yeah,
okay.
No, it's okay. As long as we're not showing them, we're okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Too bad I was going to show a whole episode next, but anyways, just joking. But he's a good leader because he loves his team and he believes in them, and they have this sense of purpose, but he loves them, and they're willing to die for whatever he tells them to do. And sometimes, he's leading them on the mission and it doesn't make sense. And even if they, sometimes they use the cinematic thing where he's like, okay, I have this plan. And all of a sudden you see the plan happening and you're like, what? This doesn't make sense. What? This is all falling apart. What's going on? And then something happens. You're like, oh my gosh, mind blown, and it's isn't that, just thinking about this, the leadership of Christ the King.
Isn't that so
Like,
much the Lord?
can we, who loves us and who leads us, but sometimes it doesn't make sense, but we have to trust that whatever part that we're playing, whatever that call is in our daily lives, that it's working towards something good, and just like to persist in that and like be willing to die to self, even maybe that doesn't mean martyrdom, but like that daily little martyrdom of whatever it is.
It's very true. Like, I don't know if you guys get uptight about your own holiness, but I find that I get uptight about my own holiness. Like, I'm like analyzing my life a lot of the time. Being like, did I pray well? Like, is this good? Or like, I should pray more. I should be more what should I like?
Right.
But which is such a prideful thing in so many respects, because then I am Lord of my own holiness. Like it's like I need that reminder all the time that the Lord is the author of my holiness, like that he is the author of it, and that even in times when, because the saints all talk about that, about times like when you fail, it's like it should actually be expected, like it should be expected that we will fall hard and regularly, like
yes,
and that,
and to not expect that, or to be like, why did I fall, I'm so stupid, is actually pride, because it means that we don't really know ourselves.
Exactly. And because we put more trust in our own human nature than we do in Christ's ability to shape our human nature into something that is holy, And so that's like, I find that's something that that's been on my heart a lot, is like a like a holiness that trusts in Christ's kingship is a holiness that doesn't limit Christ's kingship in its formation, if that makes sense,
well, it's like, so many of the saints, they reach a certain point where they're like, I don't even know if I'm doing the right thing. I don't even know if I'm saved, or if Jesus is gonna, I don't know. I think I'm called to do this, and I'm just going to persist in it, but I really have no idea what I'm doing, And like they get to that point, and I think that there's something to that, like kind of what you're saying, Aaron, if we're not the ones that author of our own holiness, and that like to come to a certain point where you're just like,
I have to trust the Lord.
Like,
I have to trust that he knows how to speak to my heart. I have to trust that I know how to listen to him. I have to trust that he's going to give me the grace to do the things that I need to do, and that if the grace is not there, then I don't need to be doing them, or
and that this is a king. If we're called to follow this king, his kingdom, victory looks like failure. And so
exactly. Sorry, I just like popped in there with really loud.
No, that's good.
But it's true.
Victory looks like failure. So when I'm failing and when everything's falling apart, that might just mean that this is Christ really acted. Like this is the stuff, right? This is the resurrection is going to come out of this. Because you look at so many of the saints and their missions, and their John Henry Newman, he like was trying to found this whole like Catholic university, and it was just an utter failure. So many of the saints are just marked by failure in the eyes of the world, right? We talk about this a lot. That's the kingdom of God, like, because it's not actually a failure. It's just that we don't actually know what the heck's going on.
Exactly. Yes. I think that, that is something we really, like, in theory, it sounds, oh yeah, that's true. But like, it is to live that is to trust God, like to really live that. And obviously I'm not telling you really go out there and fail on purpose. It's not what I'm like, don't study and don't do your job. And like, no, I'm not saying like abdicate your responsibilities, but but when you go hard at your responsibilities and you're trying to fulfill the work that has been put in front of you and it all falls apart, maybe that is just the Lord saying like, don't like, let me, like, I'm here. And let this failure, like you said, Nicole, not, I mean, Mother Teresa used to say that, she's like, there's no success or failure. There's just faithfulness. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
And that's the measure.
I don't like that. The human part of me.
It's not fun.
Yeah. No. And it's the difference between working with him in things and then having things happen to us or not to us or something like that. Like, because I actually just looked up, there's a meditation from the spiritual exercises of Saint Ignatius called the Call of Christ the King, and it's like one of the central meditations. And Ignatius starts out by asking us to ponder the call of an earthly king, and of course, like there were actual kings in his
At that time,
so
yeah.
a little bit
Right.
easier, like you were saying, but he, like, it's using all your senses to like imagine the stirring speech as he inspires his citizens to join him on a noble cause or on a noble campaign for a just cause. And he also promises that they'll have to go through hardships, and they'll have to go through, you know, sleepless nights and lacking food and like cold and, you know, all of those kind of things, but that on the day of victory you're going to share that victory with him, you know. And it's like, and we can imagine that because we've seen, I mean, whatever, like, I don't want to bring up Game of Thrones because I think it's a poor example of this, but like,
Right.
but like in terms of the kingdoms, like we've seen movies like that. We've seen,
Oh, yeah.
we can imagine that, because when the king is really good and you can see that king is good in front of you, like, yes, like, I can imagine like following him even at the cost of my own hardship. I can, because it is worth it. Like the victory that is being striven for is like inspiring and good and worth the pain, you know, because you're going with the good king and he's there and leading you in the thing, you know.
Right.
So then Ignatius turns it over to like Christ. Like we imagine this with an earthly king, like how much more Christ, like that Christ is asking us to, he's also called us to, you know, suffer hardships with him before entering into glory with him. He wants to bring good to all people. He's asking us to join the mission. Like it's a whole different way of like even looking at his kingship in my life, and like as opposed to just like, I don't know, surrender and being about, it's like, no, he's calling me to like join a mission that's bigger than just me.
Yeah. You know what, it strikes me too, Aaron, when you're talking, that when a king calls you to join a mission, he calls a bunch of people. And so this is immediately about community, and it's about faith together as a church, not a bunch of individuals, but you're part of this kingdom, you're part of this people. And so maybe part of also what it means to be under the kingship of Christ is to be, you know, in communion with our neighbor. And what does that look like? Like, that's a whole other, I feel like I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, you know, but just that's part of what it means is, and then to be in a team of people on this mission who are all kind of different. And I think that, you know, I mean, there's so much division within the church, and I'm not even talking like within the Catholic Church, sure, but just within the Christian church and the world, right? There's all of these, so much division, but, you know, there's often talk about like, well, what unites us is like, or what, you know, in the movies, like a trope is like you have these two enemies, or then there's this other thing, and then all of a sudden they have a common enemy, and now they're working together, right?
Yeah.
And so how often do we think of, you know, people who are different than us in the church as kind of like the enemy because they're just wrong, you know, obviously. And yet can we come back to this sense of like, well, we're all serving the same king, Jesus, and we have this common enemy, sin, Satan, evil. So how can that unite us? Can that unite us in like this fight? And what does that look like? You know?
I love like all of this. I'm like Nicole, in just the episode we recorded, we were talking about how, Nicole, you love like action movies and stuff like that. I love action movies also. And like, I was thinking of like, well, of fantasy, that kind of stuff. Like, so, you know, and a lot of people love like Lord of the Rings. So I'm thinking like his description, Ignatius' description, like you could apply it to, you know, like Aragorn or Theoden or like all these like characters. And in the movies, like you can see the speeches, and they are really inspiring and awesome. Or like Braveheart, you know, the Mel Gibson's character, I for some reason can't remember his name right now. But like, I think and it's exciting and stuff like that. But and also it's kind of fun to think about. It's kind of fun to think about our lives in a missionary way like that, you know? But it goes back to, Nicole, what you said about, well, what is the battle though? Like, I'm not out there to go, you know, like, it's not about this argument that I'm going to have this about, you know, some obscure point of theology with somebody. Although sometimes, I'm not saying that's never the case. There is the case sometimes where we're called to that, but often it's not that. And often it's like, it's the battle against principalities and powers. Like where is Jesus not Lord of my life. And in that sense, like when I surrender to him, where am I being asked to deploy? Like who are the people I'm being asked to love and serve and like bring the gospel to, not just through action, but through words, through my heart, through everything in me, you know? And I always resonated with like that trope, like the trope of being a soldier. Like I remember, I think I've told this story before, but I remember as a kid, my uncle was talking to my brother. He was like, you know, you should be like, think of being like a soldier for Jesus. Like, it's so awesome. And I remember being like a girl, like I was 4 years old and everyone's like, well, I want to be a soldier for Jesus. Like, can I be a soldier for Jesus? And nobody was telling me I couldn't. I think I just kind of misinterpreted. I was like, well, that's not fair. I want to be one. And then I was like, oh, I can be one. Like, that's cool. You know, and I think that idea, and Ignatius would know that because he was a soldier.
Yeah. Right.
He's writing from experience in a way, you know? And so it's like, okay, he's using imagery that isn't just for fun. If there's something real about that, and something rises up inside of us, I think, when we hear that kind of the battle cry, you know, like Christ the King is calling us into battle to confront evil with love. And love isn't warm and mushy and like nothing. It is warm and mushy. So, you know, that's great. But it's also courage and endurance and like, I don't know, like patience and all these like incredibly.
It's difficult. And and the other thing that strikes me from that meditation too is like in the call to serve an earthly king, right? It's a call to serve him, but it's a call to rejoice in his victory. Like, which is also like, that's something really to think about, you know, because there are a lot of places where I rejoice in my own victory. Like, there are a lot of places where, like, even if you're thinking about Ignatius, like in his early life, like he was absolutely seeking his own glory. Like he was seeking to get the damsel in distress because of his military exploits and coming back the hero. And even in an earthly, like if you have like a band of people and they're fighting for a king or whatever, like there are going to be, you know, military heroes or people who are like seeking to prove themselves and like all of those kind of things. But that's like, but there's an element, like the Lord is asking us to like, we have to be able to see his goodness and see that his goodness, his greatness is more valuable than my self exaltation.
Yeah. Right. And maybe that's where it's like, my victory is not always like my failure can be his victory. You know?
Yeah. That's right. And then it's a cause for joy. It should be anyways. Oh, I mean, like it's easy to say. It's like much harder to live, but
easier.
You know,
and there's sorry. Yeah.
I was just going to say it's hard to see sometimes because we, I mean, earthly victories you can see in a battlefield, in the result and things, you know, but the Lord's
like
victories, and we cannot often see what the final outcome is or what's happening in hearts or all of those kind of things. And so that's where it's like, it can be very hard to like, to
it is hard. Yeah. Because I can think of areas in my own life right now where I feel like I'm failing and I feel like I'm stuck and I don't know how it's going to turn out. And for me to then look at that and be like, oh, well, must be the victory of Christ right now. I'm like, really, really self. Are we going to say that, you know, like that's just cruel, you know, but, and yet there is something in that gives me a spark of hope where it's like, okay, maybe I just don't know what's happening and that's okay. And if I really am thinking long-term here, like heaven long-term, then maybe this is okay. My failure right now, is not actually going to be an ultimate failure. And I just to trust that God's, you know, has
because it is the victory of Christ. Like it is the victory of Christ. If there is an increase of trust in you, it is the victory of Christ. If there is like a peeling away of some pride, it is the victory of Christ. If those things are happening.
Yeah. Right. It's just not fun. And it does not feel like a victory. Right. No. But it is, but that is so true. That is so true.
Yeah.
It's humbling.
Yes, it is. And that is a good thing.
Yes.
You know, like
thanks, Rachel.
Right? No, I so relate because I remember, and this is shout out to Ania Krysciak, who's chaplain at Guelph when I was in university, and she had taken a bunch of us to World Youth Day trip in Australia. And we were joking. She was like, man, she does. She's a very humble woman, but she's like, I never pray for humility. She's like, God answers that prayer. He does, And I was like, he really does though. And like, he does it because in a way I remember in this super like saint story. I have so many saint stories today, but this is St. John Vianney. Like, I think there was like this story about because the devil used to like harass him a lot. Like there's lots of stories where he used to get like harangued by the devil, and he just was kind of like, it doesn't matter, guys. Like, it just means God's doing something awesome. Just chill, everybody,
Isn't there a story? Can I sidebar this? Isn't there a story for him where like the devil, he was sitting on the toilet and like praying, and then the devil started being like, oh my gosh, like you're praying on the toilet. Like, what are you? You're a terrible person. Da da da. And St. John Vianney is like, I'll make you a deal. God can have what goes up from here, and you can have what goes down.
I never heard that. That's amazing. I love it.
I don't know if it's true or not, but my dad used to tell that story. So
I love it. I love it.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah,
Continue.
that's a great one. Another one that I've heard is that the devil appeared to him and was just like, if there was like 2 other souls as humble as you or something like that, like my reign on earth would be like over, because like that's one of John Vianney's things. Actually, failure, like it's good to bring him back because he failed a ton, like he was a nobody, but God, oh my gosh, did he like just trust the Lord, and like God did so much, but his humility remained. Like he never rejoiced in his, like what you said, Aaron, in his own victories. He just left it in the Lord's hands always, and that was his calling. And obviously, like, we're not all St. John Vianney, but I think it points to this reality of like, humility is a powerful weapon. It's a powerful weapon in the battle against evil, and but I also, the other thought that came to me about the kingship of God was, there are these areas, and we mentioned them earlier on, that we are struggling to give up control, or just areas in which we're suffering. And I mean, this podcast is about suffering, and we're waiting on that victory of the Lord. Like, we're waiting for that resurrection. We're waiting for that victory. And I think that's part of what connects us to this waiting idea that we're going to go through in Advent, because there is, in that way, it's kind of like, I'm thinking of the Lord of the Rings and these other things where like there are times when you're just like encamped, and you haven't heard the battle cry yet, or you've fought your battle, but you're still waiting on the outcome of the war or something, and there are areas in our lives where we're never going to know that, like you said, Nicole, and we'll maybe only know on the other side of heaven. But there are areas in our lives that we're called to wait for the next instruction, or we're called to wait for the next movement in this whole journey. And today I was listening to, Drew Barrymore has like a talk show now. I don't know if you guys have seen it on YouTube, but she's a talk show.
No.
Cool. I just go down all kinds of YouTube things. And today she had a guest on, oh my goodness, I can't remember his name, but he's this Broadway actor, I guess, who is very active in like the LGBTQ community, and has written a book recently about his life, suffers with AIDS, like all kinds of things in his story that are interesting. And he was speaking about, in his book, he had a lot of trauma. He'd been through a lot of trauma, sexual abuse, and other things like this. And there was a point where I guess he grew up in some kind of Christian community, and all the things about him, like his personality, he was a little bit more effeminate, and his, sexuality, all these things, he was made to feel shame about. And I'm not speaking about doctrinally where the Catholic Church says, like we profess everything that the church teaches. I'm just saying, like, it was really interesting for me to hear this guy with a very different perspective than my own, but my heart just went out to him because he just kept talking about, like, he kept saying the word shame. He's like, everything in his life was about shame. And in writing this book, he said he just felt like he released, like he let in the light, and he just released that shame. And he's like, I've done everything that I've done in my life so far under this like oppression of shame. He's like, now I feel like what's going to happen? Like, what's the calling on my life? He was using almost like, honestly, like, that's biblical language.
So beautiful. That's so beautiful.
It was. And I was thinking, like, there is something that there's somehow the Lord is, and I hesitate to, like, there's lots of different popular stuff, and I'm not trying to make this guy into a prophet, or, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to put something on him that he wasn't even trying to put out there.
Yeah.
Sure.
But I think for me, when I was listening to him, I was like listening, I guess, with God, and just there was something that spoke to me about our lives, I think, as Christians, and as Catholics, we're like, we are given this grace that is supposed to be explosive in our lives. Like the kingship of God is supposed to unleash us from the shackles that hold us down, you know? And there is something, I think, that there in all of our lives, there's areas where there are shackles. I think that we're waiting for the king to come and set us free. And sometimes he asks us to stay there a bit longer. I don't know. That's maybe theologically inaccurate, but you know what I mean? Like sometimes we're there.
That's true. Yeah.
We're still waiting.
Or we're free. The shackles are free and the door is open, but we're just not able to take that leap out and step into the freedom yet.
Right.
You need that courage or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess wherever we are, the three of us and anybody who's listening, like, you know, the kingship of God is real. Jesus is a real king. He's not a king in our minds. He's not a king like in the Bible, which is a storybook. Like his kingship is alive and it's real, and we are called to enter into it. So, you know, we're excited to kind of be orienting ourselves, I think, like disposing ourselves, putting ourselves in a position to receive the call, to receive the grace, to receive the next instruction, the next, you know.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You know, and just thinking like, okay, so if you're a regular listener, then, or even if you're not, we invite you then to take a little journey with us in the next few weeks. Maybe do a little bit of reflection on, you know, where is Christ King in your life, and where do you feel like it's not feeling so surrendered or whatever it is. And then we're going to be talking about like waiting, you know, waiting for love and waiting for the Lord's action in our lives, or waiting for our own, you know, healing so that we can respond to the grace that God is giving us in different ways. And waiting for Jesus to come again, which is part of what we believe as Catholics, that he's actually literally going to come again, which wouldn't that be great? Anyways, not wouldn't, but won't it be great?
It will be great.
He's coming soon.
He will.
Better come soon.
You heard it. You heard it here from Aaron's lips, guys.
That's right.
You heard it har.
You heard it har.
It's coming again.
Yes. Journey with us.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I'm excited, actually. I'm really excited for our Advent journey together. Before we close out, I guess it's God Winks time. And I'm sharing this week. And actually, I had planned something else, but this just occurred to me, which is I just think is really funny, because we're going to do an episode on waiting for love. And that is, you know, we haven't. Just stay tuned for that. But this is maybe a little funny anecdote, maybe to whet your appetite, you know? So I'm single, and I have lots of wonderful friends who are like, hey, you know, let me set you up, wing woman you or whatever, and all this kind of stuff. And so this is a while ago, a friend of mine, actually Kat, she did an episode with us earlier this season, which is great. Kat Lung, she had a wedding to go to, and she's like, Rach, this is going to be, it's an awesome place. There's going to be lots of guys, Catholic guys. It's going to be fantastic. I have a +1. I want to take you, like, you should come with me and we'll go. And she was single at the time too. So we'll go and we'll just like hang out with people and meet new people. It's going to be great. It's going to be fantastic. And I can't explain to you that how much in that time of my life, how many times did this happen? And people are like, oh my gosh, it's going to be amazing. You're going to meet so many new people. So we go to this wedding, and this is what would happen to me over and over again at that time. Not one, like every guy there was married, clergy, discerning, or engaged. Like there was that one single available guy over 18 at that wedding. And I told her, I would tell her, like, listen, Kat, I know, like, you love me, man. I get it. But I'm just telling you, God is just not, it's not happening right now. He's just closing the doors, like stopping, stop sign. There's like caution tape, no man allowed in Rachel's
That's so funny. I also love that you said like over 18. Like,
yeah. Oh yeah.
Even a wide window.
I'm just telling you.
Like,
I'm being super real here. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I wasn't really looking for people just over 18, but I'm just saying that's the extent to which like what I'm saying was true. Yeah. And yeah, so she wouldn't believe me that that's what God was doing in my life. I'm like, I'm telling you, man. And then we get to this wedding, and she was like just gobsmacked. She's like, oh my gosh, like he is, I don't know. And I was like, dude, you and me both. Yeah.
Like, sorry for dragging you down with me. You know, if she hadn't brought you to the wedding, it would have been full of single guys probably.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah. So that's kind of a snapshot of a part of my life that was very hilarious, but also excruciatingly painful. I was like, come on, Lord, like, why can't I even just like have friends? Like, I can have single guy friends. I'm not going to go after them or something. But he just kind of like shut me down everywhere. Yeah. I also now feel like I need to tell people that I'm not some kind of like man eater person. It's like so not me at all.
When you said like go after guys, I was no. Rachel with like very long eyelashes, like in bright red lipstick.
Just yeah.
I
mean, you guys know me. That's literally the farthest thing from the truth that's possible for me as a person.
Yeah.
But anyway, there you go. It's a lovely, humiliating, but also hilarious,
fantastic,
and joy-filled story.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's great.
Yeah, so we'll see you guys you'll hear us, I guess, at the Advent series on the Advent series.
I'm excited for this.
Yeah.
It's gonna be awesome. Yeah. Oh, should we just give oh, never mind. Well, I was gonna say we could give a heads up about episodes, but we'll do that next week. We can
we have some really exciting guests. We should just say that right now. We are really pumped about the series because it's gonna be
amazing.
Yeah. Which by the time this is out, hopefully you will know who they are and stuff. But it'll be good. We're excited.
Yeah.
We're excited.
All right. Hear from us then. Bye guys. God bless.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of In the Thicket. If you like what you hear, give us a rating and hit that subscribe button. We have new episodes every Monday with more stories and honest conversations about life when the going gets rough and the hope and humor amidst it all. We'd love for you to join our community on Instagram and Facebook at In the Thicket Podcast. While you're there, let us know how we can pray for you. God bless and see you next week.